crack on. How to future-proof your data analysis with event and report creation in GA4. Thank you. So we've got two and myself today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So first off, I'd like to introduce you to Emily Redman, who's an account manager working with clients here at Waggadah. Emily, floor's yours.
Hi. Yeah, so I am client-facing here at Waggadah. I've been working with GA4 for about a year and a half, so I've seen it go through some changes. It's constantly changing, but yeah, here at Waggadah, I'm an account manager. So my day-to-day, I deal with clients and yeah, help them achieve their goals.
Thanks, Em. And we've also got Ursula Summers, who's a real GA4 expert on the digital delivery team, and I'll let her introduce herself as well.
Thank you, Dan. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I'm working on the digital delivery team, which is a bit of a mouthful at Waggadah. I started sort of focusing more on conversion rate optimization, and within that sort of really focusing on tracking to look at what is performing well on different web pages, and that's really how I got into setting up goals and event tracking in GA4.
Thanks, Ursula. So if we just move on to the next slide, it's not all about us. We are part of a fantastic team across 2 locations. So my name's Dan Jenkins and I'm head of client services. I look after teams across St Albans and Cheltenham. I look after a team which includes Emily, which, as I say, is more client facing. So we strategize, we work with clients to identify the best course of action and the best possible tactics to meet and exceed their goals. We've grown from what had its origins in technical SEO through to what is now a full 360-degree multi-channel digital agency. So we've got experts that span on-page and off-page search engine optimization, Google Ads, PPC, organic and paid social media, the list goes on. We're also HubSpot partners, which means that we work a lot with the HubSpot CRM system from both a sales and marketing perspective, and we work with a number of businesses in terms of their sales and marketing alignment as well across the UK and internationally. So before I hand over to our experts, just a gentle reminder, really, kind of, I guess, why we're here, and it's because the countdown is on. I gave a webinar not long ago, only a few weeks ago, and we were talking about how really things are going to change dramatically by the summer of next year. So you're in a great place to be looking at this now, because migrations are happening, and it's more towards the summer of next year that we're going to have that full transition for businesses from Universal Analytics, which is the traditional Google Analytics, right the way through into GA4. What I will highlight, and Ursula and Emily will be tackling some of these themes as they go through as well, is that elements that we're going to be talking through with you today are always subject to change. And partly that's the challenge because the platform is updating constantly because it's still quite embryonic, it's still quite young. But also the more that we get that understanding of the mechanics and the hows and the whys now, the better you'll understand that stuff, so that in 4, 6, 8 weeks time, if changes continue, you'll feel in a much stronger place because you'll have that background knowledge from the work that we're doing now. But it's a great platform and it is becoming more and more accessible. It's just about understanding the nuances of it. So the countdown is on. So what does that mean? Well, it means, as I say, that you've got less than a year to get yourself in shape, really, with GA4, and that you're ready for that full launch in July next year. And the team here are currently working with current clients and also new clients on their GA4 migrations. So something that we do fundamentally is kind of a basic GA4 setup where we can get an account set up and running. It's ready for you to start reporting on real-time traffic metrics such as page views, etc. But for a lot of brands, we're also doing a full GA4 setup and configuration. What that's doing is helping you get it to a place so that your in-house team, your team can then take it forward going into next year. We also offer a large amount of training and consultancy and audits, so that if you're already set up or you've been in the process of setting up, the team can have a little look at your own account for you, and then from there make recommendations or direct changes to support you in those improvements moving forward. But don't hesitate to reach out if you've got any questions about these services or you'd like to follow up after this session as well. So without further ado, I'm now going to put myself on mute and I'm going to hand you over to Ursula. And for the first half of this morning, she's going to be talking you through setup, events and goals before Emily takes over for the second half after a coffee break and gives you a full walkthrough and talks you through some metrics and kind of metric analysis. So Ursula, over to you.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, so I'm just going to start by showing you the basics of how to set up your GA4 account. As Dan was mentioning, obviously, there is a sort of sense of urgency here just with getting that data backed up. So you've got a year's worth of data to report back on once Universal Analytics stops putting traffic through. So we would recommend setting your GA4 account up with Google Tag Manager. I appreciate there may be different levels of understanding when it comes to Google Tag Manager, so I'll try to give you a sort of brief overview, but if you have questions, please, put them in the chat, or a more advanced question, that's absolutely fine as well, put that in the chat and we will have a look for you. So setting up your GA4 account is actually relatively simple. You just need to navigate to your Universal Analytics account. There you'll need to go to admin in the bottom left, and helpfully there is a sort of section called GA4 Setup Assistant, and you just need to follow those steps, and that will they'll be agreeing to terms and conditions, things like that. And once you've done all of that, you're happy, you're just going to press the create your property. So once you've set up your GA4 account, that's great, but you do need to put it onto your website so it's pulling through traffic, which is where we would advise using Google Tag Manager. So just for this, I've created a Tag Manager container just for to demonstrate this. And I'm not sure if you're on Google Tag Manager or you haven't heard of the platform before, but we would really recommend using it we recommend it for our clients and we use it for our clients. It's really helpful to configure tracking events and goals for Google Analytics, GA4, but you can also use it for things like Hotjar, LinkedIn pixels and Facebook pixels. So if you're doing any campaigns on social media, things like that, it's a really helpful tool. If you do not have Tag Manager, it's free to create and simple to set up, but we would probably recommend getting your web developer to install it for you on your website, just as it requires a bit of code and it can be, you have to be a bit careful in the back end of your website. So anyway, so this is the GA4 configuration tag, which I've set up. And I've just done this by creating a tag here. I've thought about my naming convention. So I've just labeled it TA for tag, GA4 config, as that's what I'm wanting to do. And I want this firing across all pages. We just do this as best practice at Wagada. So it's clearly labeled, we know exactly what it is. So if any other member of the team comes in or another stakeholder, for example, it'll be easy to know what's going on in your container. So this here, it's just asking for my tag type, and you can see I've just selected GA4 configuration. It then asks for your measurement ID, which will be given to you when you create your GA4 account in the GA4 interface, and you can just find that in your, you can just search for it at the top actually of your GA4 if you just type in measurement ID. It's quite simple to copy and paste there into there. You just want to make sure it's definitely the right one. Otherwise, obviously, that could cause issues and it won't pull traffic through properly. So just be really careful that you've got the right measurement ID. And then after you've done that, you want to set up your triggering. So what is going to trigger this event to happen? What will be triggering this tag, basically? And you can see here, I've just gone into to select a trigger. You just want to find the initialization all pages. So that just means that this tag is going to activate across all pages of my website. So GA4 will be on every page of my website. So when you're happy with that, you just want to press save. And then if you haven't used Google Tag Manager before, I'll just talk you through the process of what happens after that. If I can just go back to the slides. Yeah, you will want to after you've done that, you just want to preview your changes. So you can see here in the top right, there's a preview button. You just need to press that. And then you'll be prompted to pop in your website URL. So once you do that, you just press start. And this opens a debugging window of your website. So you can see exactly sort of what's going on in your website, and you can test that your tags are working. So you can see here, if your tag is set up properly, it will just come under in this window. It says tags fired, and then it's a GA4 configuration tag. You want to see that across all pages of your website automatically. So when you're happy that that's firing through and pulling through, you'll just want to press submit on the top right of that window. And then you will be prompted just to sort of label any changes that you've made. And this is really helpful if you want to go back through your version history and just see what's been updated. If something stops working, for instance, you can see exactly like, oh, this stopped working then, this is when we made this change, things like that, just so it's super clear. So you want to be as descriptive as you can in this bit. There's not a character count. So yeah, just a simple description will do, like added a GA4 configuration tag triggering on all pages. So you're just clear exactly what it is. And so once you've done that, you just have to remember to be quite patient with GA4. It's not instant. It can take up to 48 hours to start pulling through traffic in real time. But then after 48 hours, you should start seeing data being populated in your GA4, which is really exciting. So yeah, that's basically how you set it up through Google Tag Manager. So once you have, sorry, I'm just going to take a drink. So yeah, once you have set up your GA4 property and you're happy that it's working, you're going to want to think about what exactly you want to track in your GA4 property. So with this, GA4 is really focused on events. So you're going to want to start thinking about what events exactly you want to be tracking. GA4 has grouped them into 4 different types of events. So you have automatically collected events, and these are triggered by basic interactions with your app or website. So they can be things like when like a page title that a user is on, quite basic, but as they're automatically collected events, there's no sort of setup or code or needed from you, which is really great. So there is some basic events that are being pulled through in the first instance.
Just very quickly, Ursula, we've had a question come through, and I think it all kind of connects really, because obviously what we're talking about here is multiple tracking in a way. We're talking about Google Tag Manager, we're talking about GA4, we're talking about classic Universal Analytics that people are still using. Elaine's just asked the question regarding having the 2 analytics properties running at the same time. So in terms of having that on the website, would you still have that code basically? Would you have both Universal Analytics, Classic Analytics, and GA4 running in tandem at the same time on the website between now and the switchover next year?
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. Yeah, we would recommend, and we have set that up for our clients, to have both at the same time. You don't need to worry about sort of duplicate data or having double the data in one account. They do both go separately. So UA has the UA tracking ID, which is usually it's UA hyphen and then a specific code, and GA4 is a measurement ID, so it's G and then hyphen, and they go into the separate properties. It will be the same data, obviously, but Emily will talk you through in more detail. It will be displayed slightly differently, but it will be the same amount of data, essentially. It's quite helpful, actually, as well, to have both, so you can sort of compare and contrast visually for yourself the differences in the UA account to in the GA4 account. So
I think that's a really good point, actually, Ursula, because I think Emily later on as well is highlighting some of the nuances whereby you won't actually see like for like data, and a lot of that, I believe, is down to various factors surrounding data privacy and how GA4 will work as opposed to Universal Analytics. But Emily can give a bit more insight in terms of when you've got the 2 running, what you might see at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. But putting both at the same time won't affect like your tracking. It won't break anything, which is reassuring to know. So yeah.
Thanks, Ursula.
There's no problem. Thank you. Yeah, so automatically collected events, they're just what's already generated will automatically come through your GA4, very basic, like page titles, things like that. Enhanced measurement events, these are also great. They are, you can toggle them on and off when you're first setting up your GA4 property, and they are slightly more granular, I suppose. They let you measure interactions with your content by so you enable the options in the GA4 interface. There's no code changes required, and yeah, there are things like scrolls. outbound clicks if someone's clicking onto another website from your website, video engagement, file downloads, things like that. There's no code required from you or any use of Tag Manager. You just need to toggle that on when you're setting up your GA4 account in the GA4 interface. Thirdly, we've got recommended events. And so these are Google's list of recommended events, and they're designed to give you sort of a starting point for anything custom that you would want to track in your GA4 property. So we would definitely recommend having a look at the recommended events. There's a list which is published by Google. And if you're just not really sure what your business needs to track or what, where to get started, it can be a sort of good prompt to have a look at. You adding these events to your website or mobile app helps you measure additional feature and behavior, and it can generate more useful reports. But because these events acquire like additional context to be meaningful, they're not set automatically. So you would need to configure those, we would recommend, through Google Tag Manager or possibly in the GA4 interface itself. Google's list are grouped by industry, but you can use any recommended event that fits your business needs. It's just a good starting point. If you're not sure exactly what you need, it can be helpful to have a look at, and there might be things, oh, I hadn't thought of that, but that would work really well for our business, that kind of thing. And so lastly, there's custom events. And so this is an event with a name and set of parameters that you define yourself, and you can collect the information that's specific to your business. So for example, you could want to create a donate custom event for if you're running a charity, for example, and someone is like donating for your organization or from an organization to your website, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's more sort of would be more specific to your business's needs. So this is just some examples of automatically collected events. So you can see it's quite basic, that sort of thing, the page location, the title of a page that a user is on, things like that, which is great to see what pages are performing well, but it's not, you can get more granular than this. So this is the enhanced measurement events. You can see here, this will be the view in GA4 where you just need to toggle it on. Super simple. We would recommend toggling that on just so you have as much data as possible. These are really interesting. The site search in particular, if anyone's using the search function on your site, just to see what they're doing, like what's most important to users, which as a marketer, obviously, be really interested in. Okay, so this is just a sort of just to sort of recognize in Universal Analytics, these things on the left-hand column that would be previously really an action recorded in Google Analytics. GA4 is now recording it as an event, which is interesting as marketers, as it's sort of GA4 telling us what we need to look at and value. So it's just highlighting what's important to us and the activity on our website. These are the list of recommended events that I mentioned earlier, so GTM is still needed for these, Google Tag Manager, and we would recommend going and having a look on Google's websites just to see the list of recommended events, ideas to help you get started. There's lots more on the website for different types of businesses, particularly e-commerce as well. If you're an e-commerce brand, there's some really interesting ideas there for what you might want to track through your Google Tag Manager.
Just very quickly, Ursula, I've had a question come through privately just on this. So somebody's highlighted that obviously there's a lot of events now. There's a lot of kind of different, what perhaps used to be just general actions or like user habits on the website, like visiting a page or clicking on something that for a lot of brands, maybe they wouldn't have had set up as key events. It's been highlighted that obviously there's a lot more now. There's a lot more different events that are kind of being pushed or that are automatically being collected. And just what that means or what we should be looking for, or as marketers, how we can use more events to make better kind of marketing decisions. That's sort of the question. What are your thoughts on that in terms of the fact that there are more events, number one, and then also how we can pick the best ones to be tracking and what we really want to be looking at to measure success, if you see what I mean?
Yeah, interesting. I do think it is interesting how they are marking they are so much more focused on events than sort of actions and things like that. I think though what you want to look for really and I know this is a bit of a flaky answer, it does kind of depend on your business needs, what your business objectives are. I think when you're doing tracking and looking at GA4, it's really easy to just sort of focus on the data and sort of and just focus on what you're doing, but forget like the overall objectives of your business. So do really keep those in mind when you're deciding what to track, things like that, what's important to your business, for like, and different events will be important for different reasons for different businesses. So page titles, for example, for an e-commerce brand might be important because that will give you an indication of your most popular products, things like that. Or if, I don't know, if you're more of a consultancy or something like that and you have a lot of blogs, that'll be interesting because you'll see what part of your content is most engaging with users. So it will be different for different brands. But I think if you're unsure, my advice would be to like really focus on what you're trying to achieve as a business, what is a lead, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the interesting thing for me as well is that you've got more and more sort of machine learning, or, you know, I bang on a lot, talk a lot about kind of cookieless worlds and that, you know, the marketing without cookies. And I think it's interesting that somebody already highlighted, I think it was Catherine highlighted earlier in the chat, that Universal Analytics account was showing more users than her GA4 account. So obviously in that traditional analytics, the numbers were much higher than what was coming through in the GA4 account. And I think the interesting thing is that we're seeing that lower level of accurate data potentially in GA4 surrounding hard numbers. So like actual number of site visitors, actual number of converting customers. I think what's interesting is that if we track more events, if there are more touch points that we're looking at as a key kind of success metric or a KPI, I think that's only going to feed into GA4's kind of machine learning to then make better assumptions to go, well, look, if we know that 10 out of 100 people did this, we can assume that, you know, 100 out of 1,000 did this, and that sort of thing. So I do think it's interesting that there are more marketing touch points that are being considered, whereas perhaps for a lot of brands with Universal Analytics, we were just looking at traffic levels, top level engagement, and then conversions and like hard conversions, and maybe forgetting that bit in the middle. And I think that's what's interesting about this, isn't it, is that we are setting up a lot of events, and for our current clients, that are more mid-funnel. And I think that's what's really interesting, and it's only going to support with data analysis, right, and customer journey.
Yeah, the customer journey definitely will be hopefully we'll be able to have a much better understanding with all these different types of events. But yeah, absolutely.
We've also, just very quickly, Paul's just popped a comment in the chat. Data overload is also a risk of focusing on too many variables. So great advice. You can quickly get lost and draw wrong conclusions about the customer journey performance by looking at events which have no real bearing on your business. Yeah, that's absolutely true as well. The most interesting thing about that, just very quickly before we move on, is I think surrounding bounce rate, right? Because Ursula, bounce rate's not really a thing now.
No, yeah, exactly.
So I think that obviously we're coming away from bounce rate as a metric. And I think before it was throwing a lot of people down the wrong direction, a lot of marketers down the wrong direction, because they were going, you know, 9 out of 10 people are leaving this blog article and not taking an action. But maybe that blog article is hugely valuable and it's a big brand awareness piece and it's a massive information source. And if you're taking something like a bounce rate and then deciding to cull content or change content, it can, as you say, Paul, it can lead you down completely the wrong direction. So I think it is a really important consideration as to what you want to track, and B, what you want to learn from that.
And as marketers as well, I think there's so much data we can track now. We can track with GA4, track so many variables, and we can just get lost in that data. But I think it's just worth taking a step back and thinking, what actually is important for us, and why do we want to track it?
Spot on.
No, that's a great point. Yeah, exactly. So the thing that I wanted to focus the rest of the time on with rest of my time on with you is the custom events. So these will be events that are specific to your business, and what we were just saying on Paul's point, which is absolutely true about data, sort of you can get overwhelmed by it. We are setting up these events, so phone clicks, email clicks, and form submissions for all our clients. Hopefully, I think these, although the events do change depending on your business objectives, things like that, I do think these are pretty fundamental and things you want to be tracking. Who is calling your, well, how many times are people calling your business phone number, how many people are emailing you, and who's engaging with your forms, things like that, we do think are pretty vital and we would be interested to know and to have configured in your GA4 account. So to do this, I'm just going to, we would recommend setting these up through Tag Manager, and I'm just going to talk you through how I did that. If you are familiar with Tag Manager and you use it to set up sort of similar events in Universal Analytics, it is similar, but there are some slight differences. So hopefully you'll find this useful. And again, if you're unfamiliar with Tag Manager, hopefully this will give you a good starting point as well, some ideas of the type of things you can be using Tag Manager for. So I'm going to go back into my demo account here, and as you can see, I've set up these 3 tags here, which are going to be my GA4 events. I'll start with phone clicks. So I'm just going to open what I've done here, and as you can see, I've got my naming convention here. Again, at Wagada, we tend to use pipelines as best practice, just to make everything super clear and set up. Again, if another team's going in, a team member is going in and they're wondering, what is this? Hopefully it'll make it clear.
I've actually had a quick no, I just had a quick question come through surrounding naming conventions. So just whilst we're on naming conventions, let's talk through our recommendations. So you mentioned kind of the pipelines for Wagada, but maybe it's worth talking through as well how to stay organized. What actually goes in there? How would we structure those?
Yeah, absolutely. It is something I think you should think about, especially if you're just setting up your Tag Manager account, to maybe have some sort of naming conventions. If there's a couple of you on your team working on this, maybe have a chat before you do anything and just decide so you're all on the same page. I'll talk you through what we do at Wagada. You can use this as a guide if you want to, or you might have other ideas that would work for your business more appropriately. So for this one, as an example, I've gone TA, so we know that it's a tag, and then I've put in pipeline GA4, and this is really useful. The question earlier that was talking about having your Universal Analytics and your GA4 account on your website at the same time. This is telling me that it's a GA4 tag, because if you, for example, if you notice that an event is broken in GA4 that's configured in Tag Manager, but you also have the same event for Universal, you'll know which tag you need to go in and have a look at and fix, because you could have the same tag set up, but one for Universal and one for GA4. So that's just differentiating that, essentially. I've then gone for call, just because that's what I want the event to be monitoring if users are calling my business. Click, as that's the action it will be when they're clicking a clickable phone number to call my business. And for the purposes of this demonstration, I've just put all pages, assuming that you possibly have a clickable phone number, for example, in your header or the footer of your website, and it's across every page of your website. If it was just a specific page, for example, you might have it just on the contact page, which is absolutely fine. I'd probably just put contact page in there instead, just so it's super clear exactly where it is, that kind of thing. Is that clear, or is there more questions on naming conventions?
I haven't had anything come through.
No,
no, I think that's all good, Ursula. I'll jump though if I get one through now.
Sure, thank you. So then I've gone into my tag configuration, and this here is the tag type. So it's slightly different to setting up a GA4, just the configuration tag. Instead of the GA4 configuration, you want it to be a GA4 event. And then here it will ask you for your configuration tag, so you know that it's going to pull through to the correct GA4 account. And this is the one I just walked you through earlier. Once you set that up and publish it, it will come down automatically as the drop down. So you can see, because I've labeled it, it's obvious what it is. So I'm just going to select that. And then you want to think about your event name. So this will be what you see in the GA4 interface. So again, it's really important that it's just labeled clearly, so when it comes through in the GA4 interface, you know exactly what it is. So you can see here, I've just called this phone underscore call underscore click underscore all pages. It's just worth noting that GA4 seems to like underscores rather than spacing, so that's just so it's super clear and it will work properly in the GA4 interface. And it's very similar to what I've got the naming conventions.
Quick question, Ursula. Split device. So as you're setting up this goal, obviously it's a universal goal, and it'll probably fall into Emily's walkthrough a little bit in the second half as well. But in terms of goal tracking across mobile versus desktop versus tablet, one goal to be able to track that across multiple, and where then those goals are coming from.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, that will come across come across on whatever device you're on, because it's the same website URL that has Tag Manager installed. It has your GA4 configuration in there. So no matter the device, if it's the same website with the tracking set up,
just that same goal. And then it's more about how you actually utilize the platform. And again, when Em talks a bit about data analysis, that's then going to be where we can look at if that goal has been triggered by mobile user or a tablet user, and even further, I think, in terms of type of device. But yeah, Emily can go into that, I'm sure, as well in the walkthrough.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So yeah, once I've named it and I'm happy with that in my what's going to be firing through in my GA4 account, you also want to think about what parameters you want. And so that is, when this event comes through, what information do I want to know when this event comes through? So what we would recommend at Wagada as a good starting point is and these are sort of already configured in your GA4 account automatically. So the link URL and then the page location. So I'll just explain what those mean. And then it asks for the value as well. So what the parameter you want to see in GA4 and what you want that to be populated by. So the link URL, I've requested the click URL. So this basically means I want to see what users are clicking on when this event is triggered. So this is really helpful if you have multiple phone numbers on your website. You'll be able to see sort of which phone number is getting more sort of users are moving more towards. So as marketers, that could be really helpful, because you could see sort of maybe where one office is doing a lot better than another, and you might want to think about how you target your marketing according to that. Or it might just be interesting to see, oh, one office gets more calls through, whereas another office gets more emails through, things like that. And that can just help you get to know your audiences maybe on a more local level. The second thing I've asked to see in GA4 is the page location, and this value I've just populated with page URL. So that just means what page is a user on when they click my phone number. And again, for digital marketers, that could be super useful to know about, because it's like, what page is converting people? For example, are people going straight to the contact page and then just calling to get the number, or has someone read one of my blogs and found it really interesting and then wants to give us a call, something like that? Or is it on a service page? So yeah, it's just a lot to think about there, and what pages are doing well on your website, what pages are engaging with users. So now that I've configured my tag and I've requested what I want to see in the GA4 interface, I need to tell Google Tag Manager when to trigger this. So when is it going to come through as an event in GA4? What am I going to see? What is going to trigger this for it to appear in GA4 essentially? So here I've just set up my trigger. So I'll just talk you through this quickly. I've used exactly the same naming convention, other than I've just changed TA to TR to specify that it's a trigger, not a tag, which is just useful so you know exactly what it is. And then I'll just show you my trigger configuration. So here you're just prompted to fill in your trigger type, and it's just when do. So I was saying to Google Tag Manager now, I would like this to be triggered by a click, all elements. So that can be like a click of a button on my website, things like that. So if you left this like this, without any of the bit that I've got below here, that would just be whenever anyone clicks a button on my page, this tag will be fired, which obviously we don't want. We want it a bit more specific. So that's just what I've done here. So I've said, instead of all clicks, some clicks, and I've said the click URL. So when a link is clicked, that starts with and then tell.colon, and that is on any website, no matter like if it's WordPress or Wix or anything like that, a clickable phone number link will always start with tell.colon. So I know that this is a phone number. I've just left it like that in case, rather than filling in the whole link with the number, in case you have multiple phone numbers on your website. So this will automatically pull through when any of those phone numbers are clicked, rather than just a specific one if I filled out the whole number. And you can be really creative here as well. There's loads of different things to choose from. You can choose contains to track other things. For example, if you're tracking like white papers or blogs and things like that. But just for this purposes, I'm just putting starts with tell. So I can see that it'll be exactly when someone has clicked a phone number. So once you're happy with that and you set that all up, it's the same process of just wanting to preview those changes, open your debugging window of your website, and just click that number just to make sure that that's working and it's coming up as a tag fired. And once you're happy with that, obviously you'll submit that. And then again, it will take possibly about 48 hours to come through in your GA4 interface to see that event and to see those user activities of people clicking your phone number.
I think it's really interesting because, like somebody mentioned at the start, in terms of keeping Google Analytics kind of clean and neat and tidy for kind of data analysis. So the interesting thing here is that I think what the aim is to start from a place of best practice, right? In terms of setting up these goals, so that even as you glance at it on this screen, it's really easy for you know what the goal is, you know why it's there, and you've got a name, and I think the naming convention is at the heart of that as well, right? So that
Definitely.
it doesn't become massively sort of disorganized. What would you do though? But just to let the room know, I've had a couple of questions come through privately. A couple we will answer more in the second half because it's connected to some things that I know Emily's going to be covering. So I've sort of banked those ones up. But what would you recommend in terms of goal tracking or goal setting up if you've got multiple ways in which somebody can convert? So for example, let's say you mentioned white papers and downloads a couple of times. So I know for a number of our clients, we do things like lead magnets, whereby there's a lot of value in, has somebody downloaded this specific document, this resource, this piece of insight. How would you organize your goal and event tracking if, let's say, you had 10 white papers on your site and there was value in just knowing how many white papers in total were being downloaded versus knowing literally which white papers were being downloaded? How might you approach that goal setup in terms of containing, starting with URLs, and would you have multiple goals? It's just that a questions come through surrounding, if there was specifically surrounding white papers and resources, but if there was a lot of multiple things, how would you then neatly kind of track that, if you see what I mean?
There's a lot you can do. Tag Manager is extremely flexible, so there are sort of different options, and you would have to have a look, or if there's someone who's got a specific case in mind, I would be happy to have a look at that and see,
Sure.
like, look at what they've got and exactly what they would need to do.
Yeah.
It sounds like, though, from this question, what I would do is, say if it's a button click to download a white paper, I would just have one tag, so that would be one event firing through, and in that, what I did with this one, the link URL, so what link are people pressing, clicking on when the white paper is downloaded, sorry. So then you would be able to see exactly what white paper they were downloading, even if it was sort of multiple button clicks, you'd see exactly what link, and you could trigger that to be like, for example, click URL starts with, and so that it could be like, I don't know, for example, if they were downloading something on the Wagada website, I would do like www.wagada then /blog, and then that would be like, I know that they're seeing a blog downloading.
So anytime, so basically if your URL structure is clean on your website, so if like all your blogs start with /blog/ and then the name of the blog, or all your downloads begin with /download/ and then whatever, that's what's going to help us to group that up, chunk that up, so that then we know that whenever somebody's taken an action, and it's all packaged up in that one goal then.
But so your URL structure really does help in these instances. If not, though, like, don't panic, it's not the end of the world. Like, Tag Manager is so flexible that there will definitely be a way around it. Another thing that I guess actually leads quite nicely from that is form submission, and that could be great, obviously, if you have a contact form on your website, or sign up to a mailing list, or, as Dan was saying, a lead magnet that is possibly gated, so you could see just how much interaction you're getting with that. So that's another possibility as well. So I'll just show you.
Just chat through gated quickly, so just for anybody in the room, just some insight in gated content and why that might be useful.
Absolutely. So just potentially, if you have a white paper or something that's like has a lot of information on there. Sometimes businesses decide to gate it, so put it behind a form, so you're collecting contact details and things like information before you allow a user to download your lead magnet or the piece of information they're requesting. So I guess it depends case by case who decides to do that, and Dan, you'll probably have more insight on it than me, but I guess it depends on the value behind it and like how much what that means for your business. For example, a white paper download might be a massive lead for your business, whereas for other businesses it's interesting, but it's not, that's not how you nurture your leads. So
I think it is really interesting, because I think just on that, I think data capture is so important moving forward. And what I mean by that is like good, healthy, GDPR compliant data capture, so that you've got an engaged audience that you can remarket to. Because I think from things like reduction in third-party cookies, the opportunity to remarket to people purely based upon their engagement on your website is becoming slimmer. Although I know, Emily, you're going to talk a little bit, I think, in the second half about custom audiences and how you can actually create some audiences within the Google Analytics platform to then kind of remarket to. But I think the biggest benefit of anything like white papers and downloads and lead magnets is that you're able to then generate that engaged audience to remarket to. And I think we see it a lot more with B2C brands as well now. So there's a lot more, 10% discounts to sign up to a newsletter, pretty standard stuff like that, but it's all designed with that kind of data capture in mind. I think a lot more than what we saw perhaps a couple of years ago. You're happy for us to take your email address so that we can send you a receipt. Oh, and while we're at it, do you agree to take marketing communications from us as well, when you're at the counter in Argos or something? So yeah, no, I think it is interesting how much brands are now investing in that data capture. And then obviously you want to make sure that you're tracking all those kind of key goals in your GA4. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, that is really interesting. And it is interesting seeing how creative brands are getting with it, like new ideas, especially B2C, for sort of gated content, things like that. So yeah, that leads quite nicely onto form tracking. And I would say that form tracking is slightly more complex than just sort of monitoring phone call clicks, email clicks, but obviously it can just be so valuable to have in your GA4. We would recommend putting it in your GA4. Most websites tend to have a form, so it can be useful to at least be aware of. The thing to note here is that I have set this tag up assuming that there is a gravity form on a website. You do get different types of forms. Gravity tends to be the most popular. So if you do not have a gravity form, I would just recommend you can pop us a question in the chat about it if you're worried about it, or just looking at that trigger, because the trigger will be slightly different if it's not a gravity form. So that's just something to bear in mind. But if you have any questions about it, definitely let us know. So I'll just talk you through my naming convention again. As you can see, it's looking pretty similar. So I've got the tag, pipeline, GA4, form submission. That's what I want the event to be. And then G form submit is where it will be slightly different depending on your form type. But all this is saying here, G form submit, that is a piece of code that when somebody completes a gravity form, that piece of code is put in the back end of your website by gravity form saying, yeah, someone submitted this. So that is the sort of action that I want to happen when this event is fired. And then I'm just, for the purposes of this, I've just put all pages. You might want to put a contact page, or for example, you might want to put it on like white paper downloads, whatever. It could be just wherever it is relative to your business. So the same again, I've selected a GA4 event rather than the configuration, and my configuration tag is the one that I created earlier, just on the little scroll down, tag GA4 configuration, all pages. So I'm confident that this is going to the right GA4 property. My event name, so what I want to see in the GA4 interface is gform underscore submission. So this is just telling me, yeah, somebody submitted on my gravity form. And then my event parameters, so what I would like to see when when this event comes through in the GA4 interface. This can also apply to any type of form that you have, any form type that you have. I would like to see the form ID. I find this really useful, and it can save you a lot of time as well if you have, for example, multiple forms across your website, like to download a white paper, sign up to a mailing list, contact page. This means you can use the same tag for all of your forms, and it'll be differentiated by your form ID. So for example, if you see number 1 and you're like, oh yeah, I know that that means someone's filling out my contact form, or oh yeah, I know that number 2, someone's signing up for a mailing list, things like that. It saves you all the configuration, and it's differentiated in the interface for you, which I think is really helpful. And then your page location, which I also think is really helpful, just telling you where exactly a user is when they submit a form. And so this could be helpful if you have a form to download multiple white papers, things like that. You can see, oh, which ones are actually converting, which ones are like the most important to users, what sort of content do my users want to see. So yeah, I would say that those two are relatively helpful. You'd want to see those in the GA4 interface. So once you're happy with, and that can be applied to any type of form, sorry. So once you're happy with what you want to see in your GA4 interface, you're going to need to tell Google Tag Manager when you want it to trigger this tag. So when someone has submitted a form, essentially. So as you can see here, I have set up a custom event for this tag to be triggered, and you just do that here when you choose your trigger type. Previously for the phone call clicks, I'd put all elements, but you can just see I've scrolled down here to go just event. And again, I definitely recommend having a look in here if you're new to Google Tag Manager. There's lots of different types of things you can tag and set up. So yeah, definitely would recommend looking at that. So I've selected custom event, and my event name is G form submission. Note the case, the like capital letters that I've put in there is relative to the piece of code that is fired when you when a Gravity form is completed on your website. So this is the bit where if you do not have a Gravity form, you would just have to tweak that triggering to make it work on your form. But yeah, this is just telling Google Tag Manager to fire this tag into the GA4 interface as an event when G form submission piece of code comes up. So i.e. when someone has submitted a form. So again, when you're happy with that, it's the same process of just navigating to the preview section in the top right of your website. That will open your debugging window. You then want to fill out a form on your website to just test that that is working. Definitely mark it as tracking, please ignore something like that, so another member of your team doesn't pick it up and wonder why you're completing your own forms. And yeah, then just submit that, make sure that it's working. And once you're happy with that, you just submit it and add a short description of what you've done, what you've configured, and then wait possibly up to 48 hours to see that in your GA4 interface. I'm just conscious of time, so the last one I've set up quickly was the email click tag, sorry. And you can see that I've done a similar naming convention to the phone call clicks. I've just changed the email here because that's what I want to monitor rather than someone phoning. I've put the same exactly the same setup here. I've just changed to the phone clicks. I've just changed that to email instead of phone. So that will differentiate in the GA4 interface that this is an email event rather than a phone call event. And then I've also asked to see what link people are clicking on when they email. So if you have multiple offices, you could see so maybe what office is getting more emails, like maybe where you need to target more marketing or things like that. The page URL, what pages are prompting people to email? Is it the contact page, or is it a service page, or what's really like clicking with your users? And then the triggering is again very similar to the email click, to the phone click, sorry. And I've just done this as, so click all elements. So when a user clicks a button, and then the click URL must start with mail to, which is always configured when it's a clickable email link. So that's just saying what a user needs to click on for this tag to be triggered. So once you've done that and you've saved that, you'll just want to preview it again, the same process, just check what's going on, practice clicking that email there in your debugging window, the email link, sorry, and then that should just, you should just make sure that that tag is firing, and then once that's working, you can submit, just make a note of your changes, and then that'll be it, and you should see it in your GA4 interface. So that's all the sort of tags that I've set up as a basic starting point. This is an example of what I've set up, how it would look in the GA4 interface, which Emily will go into in more detail. Sorry, but just to see there, this is all the events that I've set up, what they look like, so that in the conversions, just so what you can expect to see. Yeah, and those are the custom tags that we would recommend setting up just as a starting point. But yeah, you're welcome obviously to play around with it, especially now while sort of GA4 is still in its sort of infancy and still developing. It's a great time, especially if you're not used to Google Tag Manager, to just going in there and seeing what you can set up, what you can do. It's a really useful time now before Universal Analytics comes to a close completely. Just seeing what you can configure and what you can set up, we'd really recommend sort of having a look and seeing what you can do. Yeah, so I hope that helps, and I hope that gives you a bit of inspiration about what you might want to be using Tag Manager for, and yeah, a bit of guidance really.
Fab, thanks Ursula. So I think we're shortly going to take a quick break, but I just wanted to open it up to a couple of questions. So we've had some great feedback. Sophie Hudson, really helpful. No problem, Sophie. Paul, great overview, really useful. Question, revenue. Yeah, great question, Miklos. So Ursula, thoughts regarding revenue. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Miklos, I think your question surrounding how do you attribute financial value to a goal, or financial value to a conversion? Is that right? Yes, I think so. Financial kind of revenue or financial value to a goal, so that, like, let's say a value of a lead is worth a couple £100 or something, just as an example. How can you set up goals that you can actually track kind of revenue and revenue growth within that as well?
Sorry, just so I understand, would that sort of be like e-commerce tracking, or?
I think oh yeah, Miklos is asking as a oh, I see. No, so not so much e-commerce in terms of product, but you know, on the screen that we've got here, where we've got events on the left, we've got conversions, total users, and then we've got event revenue, which is currently set to 0. I believe it's just a case of that when you set up a goal, you can apply a revenue value to that goal, right? So then if you get 10 goals that were worth, I don't know, £10 each, that would be £100 total event revenue. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a sort of in Tag Manager, there is a sort of variable which you can add, which will check which will pull in your revenue on those events, which is really helpful. And then I think there is a bit of configuration that you will then need to do once that pulls through in the GA4 interface. Yeah, I think that's not very detailed, sorry.
No,
I can follow up more detail, but
yeah. No, maybe we can give a bit of just a bit of a point, and maybe a couple of screenshots as well in terms of how we approach that. I think that'd be great. But yeah, it's more so that because there's a difference, you see, between e-commerce tracking, where that's code based, and so it pulls in every product that you sell through your website, and then you can see we turned over 1 million or 2 million or whatever. But there's a difference between that and applying a revenue value to an event or an event trigger. They're both slightly different things, but then you can see that come through. Great question just come through from Paul just before we take a break. And I think, Emily, you're actually going to cover this after the break. Is that right?
Yeah. That will come after the break. And good news, it's pretty easy. So.
Good. That's what we like to hear. So Paul's asking, can GA4 be enabled so you can track it across domains, i.e. you have a website with a third-party tool embedded, which is a chatbot. Can GA4 tags be applied across the website and chatbot to track end-to-end customer journey, even though the chatbot is hosted elsewhere? Yeah, we will definitely cover that in the second half. And I think that's also covered with when using tandem with engagement platforms. We'll talk about that as well after the break, surrounding multiple platforms, and that's multiple analytics platforms. Yeah, okay. Fab. We'll make sure we cover all of that after the break for you as well, Damien. So what we're going to do now is I think we're just going to stretch legs, grab a coffee, and we will be back. We will start again, hopefully within the next 5 minutes. So we'll take a quick short break, and then we will crack on in the second half, whereby Emily will be giving you a full walkthrough, and we'll be answering these 2 questions as well. But thanks again, Ursula. I know you're going to stay on as well for the second half, so that if there are any questions, you can field those tricky, but the trickier the better. We like tricky.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we will see you after the break. But thanks everybody, and have a great few minutes and grab a coffee.
Thank you.
Fab. So welcome back, everybody. There's been some lovely messages come through. So I'm super glad that you found the first half useful. As we say, we're very aware as well that some of these areas are quite technical. Obviously, there are different takeaways for different people at different points as well, and there might be some nuggets that you sort of hear today and that you see today that might not fully sink in until tomorrow or the next day, or even if you rewatch the webinar, the sort of the masterclass. But the point is that it's only going to serve to fuel your kind of confidence, hopefully, is the aim, and understanding of the platform moving into next year. So on that tone, I'm going to hand over now to Emily Redman. Emily spends a lot of time, as she mentioned, in Google Analytics and specifically kind of reporting to clients and communicating with clients as well. So the interesting thing from this half that I'd really like you to consider is how we can analyze this data and communicate internally and sort of make better marketing decisions, really, as marketers from what we're seeing in GA4. And I believe that during this section, Emily will also engage with those kind of two questions, really. So one is about choosing the best, having more than one analytics platform, and the other is surrounding cross-domain and cross-domain sort of tracking as well. But if anybody has any further questions, keep up the momentum, pop them in the chat, drop me a message personally or publicly, and we will always endeavor to answer them. And if we don't have the answer for you on this session, I guarantee that we will follow up very quickly afterwards on LinkedIn or via email. Fab. So without further ado, Emily, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So as Dan said, yeah, I'm an account manager, and it's basically my job to go into the platform and find those really useful bits of information in GA4. So I'm going to start with a walkthrough of the platform. So if we start here, I'm just checking everybody can see my screen. Okay, yeah, good. So yeah, if we start here in the left-hand side, so I'm going to go through the reports, some fun exploration things that you can do with reporting and configure in a second. But what I did want to start with is this advertising portal here. So I really like this view because it's replaced the assisted conversions in Universal Analytics, and it's now called a conversion path. So what it does is just show the touch points that your users are engaging with to basically result in a conversion. And I won't go massively into detail with it because it was all it's laid out pretty well, pretty self-explanatory if you go through the conversion paths and kind of look at what your own conversion path is for your business. So what I want to go on to next is this reporting section, which is the most sort of used feature in analytics. And here with this snapshot, it gives you a really good general overview of your website's data here. And I will go, each of these cards are all represented down here on this left-hand side. So I will go through each one individually in a minute. But some things I did want to pick out, which is quite new in this in these cards, are these users by country. Really interesting if you have your customers are international, so where the most popular users are visiting from here. And another interesting card here is the user activity by cohort. So this helps you understand just how frequently your users are visiting your website after their first visit. So after this week 0. So all users with the same acquisition date belong to the same cohort. And we can see the number and percentage here of users actually returning to your website. So this is something that's different. And something that you may have actually noticed that has changed is there's no longer time of day reporting, which, being completely honest, I think is unfortunate, because time of day reporting is great for things like knowing when to post on social media, just knowing when your users are basically most engaged. But what I will say about this is that it's still GA4 is pretty much rolled out completely, but it's not fully rolled out. There will be changes still. So I think us as an agency will be keeping our eye on whether they do start implementing time of day reporting. But yeah, so this is just the quick sort of overview. And real-time data is similar to Universal Analytics and how that's laid out, just showing your users in the last 30 minutes. So if we start with acquisition, so how your users and sessions are being acquired. So the user acquisition is where your new users are coming from. What's really interesting here is that you can break down, you can segment your audience here. So this is slightly different from UA, where that you have a little donut up there, and it's a little bit trickier and clunkier, I find, in UA. And I think GA4 has kind of streamlined this a little bit. But I'm not sure what your opinion, whether you prefer the UA reporting or GA4, but I think I prefer this particular part in GA4. So for example, if we want to see geography and country, we can break this down, these segments by here, and there's lots of other different, so you can break this down by campaign, which we'll go on to in a bit, or source and medium. This is quite useful, showing exactly where your users are coming from. It's just loading here. So you can get really granular. Again, I think sometimes I fall in the trap of like looking at all these type of features and being like getting really involved in what all these features mean, and kind of pulling data from all these different segments. But you've got to take a step back again and think, is this actually important? Hopefully that makes sense. So your traffic acquisition here is showing where your new sessions are coming from. So here we have the user sessions, and then we'll go on to engage session, and exactly what an engaged session is in a minute. But this is useful for just showing your just where your sessions are coming from versus your users. So here in our engagement overview, we can see what Ursula was talking about with setting up events. We can actually see them all here. And then we've got event count and the total users. So here it will pull together all your automatically collected events, the enhanced measurement events, and the custom events that Ursula was talking you through earlier. So here you can also break this reporting view down by device category. So I think we had a question from Paul about seeing your events per device category. So if I click device here, your device should load. Yeah, so here we can see exactly what events are occurring on desktop versus what events are happening on mobile. And also it will break down by tablet as well. If this was, obviously we can't see any tablet data here, but if this was, if there was tablet data, it would pull through here. So this is really useful. You can also, we'll move on to tech towards us the end of the walkthrough, but you can also see a bit more of a breakdown in exactly what browser, what resolution screens. You get really granular on how your users are coming to your website. That's here. And we'll go on to how to actually toggle conversions on with it when I go on to configure. But this is where you see your conversions. Again, you can break it down here with by the same way. So the demographics or geography or page or screen or device, you can break that down here. So another thing that you might have noticed, which is different in Universal, in GA4 compared to Universal, is that we don't actually have a landing pages report. So how to view that is that you would go to page title and screen class here. Sorry, pages and screens. And then you break it down by page and screen and landing page. And here we have the most popular landing pages. Here will usually be the home page. But if we go onto some of the slightly less popular pages, we can see some different landing pages. So this is really interesting for showing what your users are landing on and then where they're going to next, which is through this page title and screen class here. So I know I looked for quite a while to try and find this, because I was like, where's the landing page report? Where's the landing page report? But it's here. It's here. So it is, once you know how, it's okay. It's okay to find. Then some other for e-commerce reporting. You find it under this monetization. This is a new term used by Google. It's called monetization, and you can see your e-commerce purchases here with all of your item revenue box here. Now, I won't go into massive detail here because it's not massively different from UA. It's slightly more, I would say, succinct in this e-commerce table, and pretty clear to see everything you should need to see with the graph at the top here, and some of your item views versus adds to basket here. And then, like I was saying, there's a retention report, which brings in the user engagement by cohort. So cohort is the set number of users but in the same time frame. And you can see that here, which may or may not be useful to you. So what is different with this retention and this sort of engagement is bounce rate is no longer a thing. And it's all about engagement time. So Google have kind of flipped it on its head a little bit, and it's not how many users are leaving your website, it's how many users are staying. And there's a few definitions for an engaged session. So it's if the user is on the page for 10 or more seconds, or if they've had one or more conversion, or if they've viewed 2 or more pages. So that's what an engaged session is, and there's no bounce rate anymore, which I think is quite an interesting change from Google. So if I just move on to the bottom here. So here we have the demographics overview. So this is really, really interesting for kind of informing advertising campaigns. But what we can see here is that Google have purposely not switched on their Google signals. I'll show you in a minute how to switch on those Google signals, but this is really key for getting a good picture of what your users sort of look like, a good general overview within the privacy settings. So you can see user by gender, interest and age. So some interests will be fitness, or they could be, another interest category is foodie, which I personally think is really really useful, say, setting up a paid social campaign. Now we have less reliance on third-party cookies. We can really target people with the interests that we know our users have from this information. So it is really useful to toggle this on. So if you just go to admin and then data settings and data collection, we just want to make sure this, so obviously we'll have this toggled off, but we want that on. And then all this information is really important to read, to make sure that you have that cookie banner and that your data is all compliant with the recent GDPR laws. So that's a really useful thing for getting that demographic data. So I go back to, so that should be all the reporting here. There's one, so there is one more, which is the tech overview. So this tech overview, it might see, when I first looked at it, I thought, oh, this is just loads and loads of information. Why would I need to know this? But really thinking about it, users by screen resolution, this would be really interesting to, could be really useful to send to your web developer and say, look, my users are mostly on this screen resolution. So can we make sure our website is absolutely perfect for users with this screen resolution? And also the same sort of theory applies for users by browser here. So that is here, and you can break that even further down if you wanted to in tech details. And again, you can break this down further by platform and device category here. So does take a while to load. So who's going on Chrome on mobile? Who are those engaged sessions? So here you can see, say if users on mobile on a Chrome aren't engaged, you can work with a web developer to see, kind of find out why that is, maybe why the average engagement time is a lot lower than other browsers and pages. So that's not a crucial report, not something that you probably be looking at all the time, but definitely worth looking into once in a while. Yeah. If anybody has any questions on this general overview, please put it in the chat and I'll do my best to answer them. But
just very quickly on that, so I there was one that came through obviously earlier surrounding kind of mobile, mobile desktop. Interestingly, obviously we tend to find that with a lot more B2C and B2B brands, it's higher levels of mobile engagement. If you're using other tools and platforms, like for example a keyword tracking tool, I know like we use SEMrush, if you're limited in terms of how much you can track, would you recommend tracking a primary channel, a primary platform across other tools as well? So let's say you've got more web traffic from mobile, 80% of your users are mobile. Would you use that information to then decide on other platforms that you wanted to pay more attention to mobile activity, mobile tracking? How can we utilize this data to better to make better decisions elsewhere, if you see what I mean?
Yeah, to an extent, I would, but I would never take what this information tells us on GA4 as gospel. So taking an example of desktop versus mobile, I wouldn't then, if there was kind of a 60-40 split, I wouldn't massively focus on the one that is 60%, because this data is sampled, so it can never be 100% accurate. But also what we wouldn't do is make big business decisions based off these numbers. There's lots of other factors that need to be sort of considered before taking those decisions. This is only helps for like a general direction. Does that answer your question, Dan? Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect.
Ellie, as well, what do you think of the sort of difference in the sort of interface of GA4 compared to Universal Analytics? Because I've heard obviously that Google were trying to make it more friendly to maybe smaller business owners that maybe do not have like a whole massive marketing team focusing on that. Do you agree with that? Or do you think, I don't know, it's similar?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that I think that GA4 has been made predominantly for privacy, to comply with all those the new sort of GDPR laws, which I'll go into in a second. But also it's more non-marketer friendly, like what you said, for business owners. There's a little bit less going on, which I think, like I was saying about the landing page report, that's not on the left hand side, but if you want to find it, it is a little bit more tricky. Once you know how, it's kind of easier, but it all looks a little bit more friendly for kind of business people that aren't marketers. Yeah, it's interesting though, because some people love it, some people like absolutely love it, and some people really, really don't like it, really hesitant to kind of make the switch. But unfortunately, they're pretty adamant, and they're going to switch off. But is it July next year?
Yeah.
putting data through UA. So yeah, it's kind of it's a change we have to get used to.
No,
Yeah.
thank you.
That's okay. So one thing that I did want to, I think where there was a question earlier about from Catherine about comparing metrics in GA4 and UA.
Yeah.
So we have had quite a few questions from our clients actually. Why aren't they the same? So there is a few reasons why they're not the same. They don't show the same data. They can't be compared because one reason is that the GA4 campaign source actually changes mid-session, but in UA another session is created if the campaign source changes mid-session. So that means that sessions and users will be lower in GA4. So hopefully that answers your question, Catherine, but there are a few other reasons as well. So if a session spans across 2 days, GA4 won't create a new session, but in Universal Analytics it will. And GA4 has more advanced filters for bot traffic, so some more traffic may be filtered out, just not getting through, which we'll go through in a minute. And another reason as well, which is quite interesting, is GA4 sessions time out after a maximum of 7 hours and 55 minutes. Don't know why they've chosen that exact time. But UA sessions max out after around 4 hours. So that's another reason why sessions may be lower in GA4.
That's really interesting. So if somebody's left their, if somebody's gone multitasked and gone off to do something else, or left a device on, it's more about when that times out and that it's actually shorter. Exactly. Right? Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Cool. So another difference is Google BigQuery is now free up to a point. It's still a pretty cheap tool, even if you do have to pay for it. So for GA4 users, it's like I said, free up to a point, which is really good if you have huge amounts of data that you don't want to be sampled. You can put it through to Google BigQuery and get a more sort of advanced look into your data. If you have big huge amounts of data, really, it's only relevant for big websites. So this was also another question we got about cross-domain tracking. So here I just wanted to introduce Ursula, who will talk you through sort of how to do cross-domain tracking within GA4.
Thank you. Yeah, so cross-domain tracking, it can be, you don't need Tag Manager, you can configure that in the GA4 interface. And it is good news in a way because it's slightly more straightforward than Universal Analytics. You don't need to do any coding, which is great. And essentially what it means, it allows, once you've set up cross-domain tracking, it allows activity to be accurately attributed to a single user as they cross domains. So for example, occasionally you may have like all of your blogs, for example, set up on another sort of domain, but you can add that in the which Emily, I'll talk through in a second, sorry, and then that will not come through in the GA4 interface as an outbound click that would be triggered as an enhanced measurement, but instead it will just show that you're crossing domains rather than, so measuring it more accurately essentially. So to set this up, you would just go to admin, which Emily is on now, and then she's gone into data streams in the property column, and then you want, sorry, then you
admin data streams, here we go.
Yeah, then you want to click web and then into that one there, what the domain, and then in the web stream details you want to click configure tag settings, which is just at the bottom there. Yeah. And then is that gone in there? Sorry. Yeah. Okay, and then in the settings section you want to click configure your domains, and then under include domains that match any of the following conditions, you would want to just choose your match type, Will it not let us do this? Sorry.
It won't, just because this is the demo account, but on your accounts you'll have all these steps here, so you'll be able to put in all your match types and domains.
Yeah, and then so when that comes up, there'll be a thing under the domain section, which you can see on the right hand side. You would just enter the identifier for your domain that you want to match, so whatever your subdomain is that you want to add cross-tracking to, and then you just click add condition to add the next domain. So if you have multiple subdomains, this is great as well. You can just simply add them in, and that will just mean that your user activity will be more accurately attributed to as users cross domains rather than counted as an outbound click. So that's really helpful and so much more simple to set up than on Universal Analytics as well, which is great.
Yeah, it's great because it no longer needs code adjustments, so you don't need a web developer anymore to do cross domain tracking. So really useful thing in GA4 if you do have multiple domains that you want under that one property. So yeah, thanks for that, Ursula.
Thank you.
I just go back onto the slide. So next, I just wanted to go through IP blocking. So now this is a really important thing to set up now that there's only one view. So in Universal Analytics, there was usually best practice set about 2 or 3 views, one sort of all website data, and then one maybe reporting view, and sort of when to filter out known bots. But now there's only one view. It is important to set up this IP blocking, which is pretty easy as well to do under admin and then under the data streams. So IP blocking, you'll want to block out, for example, your office, your client's office or your home address. This is really easy to do in GA4, like I said, under the admin section. And just to find your IP address, super easy. Just type in on Google, what is my IP address? And it will come up straight away. I think it was somebody else in the digital delivery team showed me that, and I was like, wow, I can't believe I never knew that. That's just really nifty little trick. And then you just pop in all those IP addresses there, and it will instantly block that traffic. So yeah, and just as I was saying, on those bots and spiders, GA4, another reason Google has actually justified only having the one view is because GA4 is meant to have already advanced spam blocking filters for the bots and spiders that are already pretty common and that they know. But if there's any that you pick up, you can go onto the IP blocker and block them yourself. And another really good feature that they actually don't have in this demo account, probably because it's very new, is linking your GA4 with your Google Search Console. So you have to be an editor of your Search Console property to do this, but it's really easy. I'll just go through it super quickly. You go into your admin, and right at the bottom, you have Search Console links. And then you just, obviously I can't do it because it's a demo account, but you'll just put in your property here. And if as long as you're an editor, you can link that up. And then what you will see once that is set up is Search Console will appear here. And there, I think it's just another way that GA4 is trying to streamline their analytics so that you can see sort of the important clicks and impressions that you'd usually have to go load up Google Search Console to see. So that's a useful new feature as well. So now I wanted to move on to the path exploration funnel. Now,
just on this very quickly, sorry, we did have a question come through, which I promised we'd engage in this half, which was surrounding kind of UTM tracking, so that you can also better analyze kind of campaigns and customer journey from campaigns. So I do think you're going to come on to UTM as a focused bit, but I just want to mention that now as well, because I think it probably links up with some of what you're going to be talking about here, right, in terms of kind of measuring campaign success and that sort of thing. So specifically, if you've run an email marketing campaign or a social media campaign that's got, you know, and you want to really track back that source. I just wanted to mention that in terms of an area to cover.
Yeah, that's no problem. I do have a slide on that, but I think you're right. I think it may be kind of a little bit better if I go through it now. So if we go on to traffic acquisition, so you might see here that we no longer have campaign reporting in its own sort of category. So instead, you have to break this down here by session campaign. So it's just loading. So here you'll have all the UTM parameters that have been set by Google here, and that you'll set yourself with. We recommend using the Google there's UTM builder, which is just really easy. Just put in your campaign name, source, those parameters, and then you'll find them here. We want to minimize the number of not set, because it just shows that what this means is that Google can't find a parameter that fits within, so they can't find a label that fits within your parameters. So you just want to make sure you've got those UTM set up, for example, like paid social campaigns, so that we can see the users a more accurate picture of like your engagement count for those campaigns that you're setting up, and your user number here. Hopefully that answers that UTM question. There is another slide I'll briefly go on my last slide, but that shows where to find it here. So it's just in session campaign. Nice. So next, I just wanted to go on to the path exploration funnel, which ASL know gets me really excited because it is a really good new feature. Apparently, it was actually a Google 360 feature previously, and Google 360 is a really expensive form of Google's analytics platform, meant to have less sampling, like more advanced data, modeling, which GA4 is kind of replacing. So a path exploration, I've got the bar at the top, so I just move here. So in true Blue Peter style, here is one I made earlier. So what this shows, what this is really good for, is showing the user journey. So it's found under the Explore here. Actually, I'll just go to where you find this because it can be a little tricky. So path exploration is my favorite reporting view. So it shows the user journey throughout your website, and it's great for showing what pages are leading users through the website, and you can have up to 4 steps. So what you do, you just click through. Oh, it does take a long time to load. This is why I loaded mine up earlier, but you will be able to just click through and it shows typical user steps. So you can really expand this out. One thing I will say is this data is sampled slightly for large data sets. So I wouldn't take these numbers by gospel, but more of a to show the sort of archetypal user journey here. And it's great for showing where users are dropping as well. And what I've done here, so these are all the predefined segments except for organic. So I've added that myself here. So what you do to add, for some reason they don't have organic as a predefined segment, but at Wagada, SEO is our kind of bread and butter. So it's really important for us to see the user journey for an organic user. So what you do, you press plus, go into template and acquisition, and then you go into your first user medium, you type in organic, press apply, and I've already done it, so I won't do it here, but make sure you title this a segment, otherwise it'll be untitled, and then you just save and apply. It's taken a while, but I have, yeah, so these show the percentage of users that are organic from this time frame. And then what you do, you just literally drag this segment up to here, and it shows you the typical user journey through an organic user, which is really interesting as well. So a real life example I've used this recently for is one of my clients' blogs had dropped. So I wanted to see here whether this was actually a converting blog. And then I saw that it was a converting blog because it was taking people to the contact us page. And then the team went in and re-optimized that blog to then increase its ranking on the SERPs. So this is a really nice feature. I
think it's so interesting, isn't it? Because what I hear a lot when we have conversations with clients as well, from a data analysis piece, is that it's not always that obvious kind of how your customers or users are engaging with the website. And going back to something that we mentioned in the first half in terms of making decisions, this is going to enable you to make quite strong marketing decisions in terms of where to focus your attention on a website based upon things like not just the top performing pages, but what is that route? Like, you know, we might not realize that maybe they're landing on the home page, then they're landing on a key service page. Maybe their third step in the process is to visit a team page, and which is very common in the service sector, or if you're in a solutions type business, you know, and are we really paying enough attention to our meet the team page and how we position our staff and that sort of thing? And so I do think it can help, as you mentioned in that great case study example with a blog. I think that's what's really useful, right? Because it can help us to just focus the mind not only in, as I say, what the most popular page is, but where in the journey that page is, so that then when we are updating, optimizing, editing, we can identify exactly what angle we want to take, because we know more and we're able to visually see the part that it's playing in the customer journey. Yeah,
exactly. Really useful. And it's great that it's now a free feature in GA4 when it was actually a paid in feature before. So really a good one to utilize with reporting, and then you can just save and download that report here. Sorry, it will be up here because this is the demo account. I can't, but it's usually up here. So next, I will go on to this configure section of the interface. So I wanted to start with custom audiences. So what these are really good for is creating a picture of what your users are, and then these can be pulled straight into Google Ads. So you can build custom audiences from GA4 data that then pull through Google Ads, and you can create them from scratch or use a template. So I will just walk you through here. So this is in the configure, and we have audiences here. So these are some of the audiences that this demo account has created. So it's got top spenders in Asia, non-purchaser. So this is really good for e-commerce stores as well. Highlighting the like the top spenders or low spenders or non-purchasers here. There's just so many custom audiences you can play around with here. So it will be up here in your GA4 accounts. Just loads and loads of audiences you can play around with here, both, like I said, from scratch or through a template. And like I said, these can be pulled straight into Google Ads, which is really useful. So the next thing I wanted to go through in this configure section is, so now Ursula's shown you how to set up events. This is where they will pull through, but it does take up to 48 hours to pull through here. But when they have appeared, you will see them all here. And then you can mark them all as, sorry, not mark them all, but mark the ones that are relevant to you as a conversion. You literally just toggle them on, super easy. And then they'll come through into your conversions here. So you can get a quick count of your conversions over that certain amount of that certain period, and then they'll pull through to, like I was explaining before, in the conversions section of your engagement report, which was over here. So what another really interesting difference, I would say, which we have used for a couple clients now, is that you can create events. Create new events from existing events. So we've only, correct me if I'm wrong, Ursula, but we've currently only used this feature for a page location event, which is for like a thank you page. So somebody submits, say they sign up to your newsletter, or they sign up to, if you have a lead magnet or white paper. So if they go on to, they type in their details and they submit, and it goes through to a thank you page or just a new page, you can track that under registration complete. So this is a custom event name. And I know this might be a lot to start sort of take in at the moment. So it may be with the recording, if you want to set up these events within the interface. So this doesn't need Google Tag Manager. You can go back and look at this recording, or alternatively, if you do have the demo account, you can look to see how Google have set up their page location events. This is really good for when a page location loads to a new URL. Otherwise, you can't track it. It has to be through Google Tag Manager if you stay on the same page when the user presses submit. Another thing that I will say as well here is that if you do have this URL, if you are tracking this URL within the interface as it's set up here, so a thank you page, make sure that thank you page is set to no index. Otherwise, for whatever reason, a user could accidentally click onto that within the search, and then this would register through here as a registration complete, which would be an inaccurate data recording here. So just make sure that particular form is set to no index. Yeah, so that is creating events within the interface. They've put e-commerce, you can actually do as well if a value is greater than X amount, which they've put 60, and they have created that event as a large purchase here. So that is my sort of walkthrough completed, and hopefully you understand more about what these sections are, what they mean. We'll have the debug view here, same as analytics, so that you can, same as UA, and you can find that under the configure as well. So this is really useful feature to sort of set things up, and when you are setting things up, to go into the debug view and see before you publish your tag live. Yeah, so that is the interface. So next, I want to move on to what the point of GA4 is. Now, we have touched upon it a little bit. I think, Dan, you touched upon it at the start, but GA4 is attempting to future-proof data, moving away from third-party cookies and towards relying on cookieless data and machine learning. So it has some sort of nifty machine learning ways that it fills in gaps that cookies can no longer fit, third-party cookies may not be able to fill.
Just very quickly, sorry, Em, because the questions come through, and I think it might be good to just touch on this before we go into this a little bit, although it's sort of connected. But Rowan's asking, if a client returns to your website, going back to the thank you page, so if they've selected it from their history, will that trigger as an event? And that's an interesting one, actually. That's one for perhaps you and Ursula, if anybody's got any thoughts. So that I'm understanding this correctly, I think it's to do with the difference between visiting if a user visits sorry, it's a mouthful, isn't it? There's a lot of stuff in this GA. If a user visits a page multiple times, will that trigger multiple times? Because just very quickly, the interesting thing on that is that in Rowan's example, someone's kind of selected it from their history, so it's a bit dirty data. You know, they've converted once and they've gone back. I suppose on the flip side, you've also got the situation where one user could actively convert multiple times. So let's say they make an inquiry through the website and they hit the thank you page. 2 days later, maybe they do exactly the same thing. Perhaps if customer service hasn't been great, perhaps if they haven't had a response within 24 to 48 hours, do they go back to the same source? How does that work then with the triggering of events? And if you've got the same person visiting or doing that thing multiple times?
Yeah, so in GA4, that should be one user. So if the user goes off the website and then onto say website through say history or another way, that should be one user if it's within that session time that I went through before. But it will be if it is outside of those session parameters, it will be recorded as multiple sessions. So this is another reason why the user count will probably be lower than Universal Analytics. Does that answer your question, Dan? Yeah.
Did you have any thoughts on that, Ursula, or anything surrounding how we can, I don't know, keep that clean data, if you see what I mean?
It's interesting because I do understand that obviously some people do prefer to configure their events in the GA4 interface, like they're just more comfortable with that than Google Tag Manager. But personally, at Wagada, I don't think we would configure a like form submission event just by a destination page for that reason of the thank you pages. Also, obviously, I appreciate that GA4 has more sophisticated spam filters now, but you never know, you may get a bot on your site, and if they're crawling or landing on that thank you page, that could again really skew your data. So you could think that you've had loads of form submissions and things are looking really well, but actually it could be spam. So
because that's traffic based. Understand that.
Or for example, I don't know if things move around your website, you may change that URL, and then that could mean that so when people fill out your form, they move to a different they're landing on a different page, and you could forget to update that. I personally just feel more comfortable doing it through GA4 because I just think it's more likely to be accurate. But
through Tag Manager, do you mean?
Through Tag Manager. But if you want, some people are just more comfortable setting it up in GA4, and that's fair enough. But yeah, that would be my preference.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks guys.
Cool. So that moves us on to this cookieless analytics, or third-party cookieless analytics, and how GA4 can fill in those data gaps that the lack of cookies may leave. So because of this, GA4 can actually work solely on first-party cookies using modeling to fill in those gaps. So this means that if somebody doesn't accept a cookie pop-up, what Google have said is that their sessions should still be recorded. Private, although it will, it won't necessarily be 100% accurate, like what type of session they had, events, conversions, etc. Privacy is certainly much more of a focus in GA4 in the wake of GDPR scandals, and people just getting more concerned about their privacy and where their data is going and what it's being used for. And also, like what we were saying earlier, Dan and Ursula, it is less granular in some kind of some reporting views, which does make it easier for business owners to analyze non-marketers, if that makes sense. So this was the UTM. This is what my UTM tracking slide that I was going through, which I have gone through, but this just shows sort of how to set up a UTM builder with Google's tool, which is really simple, and we'd recommend especially for campaigns to set up those UTM tracking parameters. Another thing that Google is doing now with GA4 is it's in the early stages of predictive audiences. So Google can actually predict future consumer behavior of users, which is really interesting. But the caveat here is that at the moment, it's only eligible for businesses that currently are taking in a huge volume of e-commerce purchases. But it does definitely lead into a wider conversation, I'd say, about the future of analytics with artificial intelligence and machine learning, and kind of what this could hold for data platforms in the future. So yeah, these predictive audiences are definitely one to watch. So my final slide, I just want to touch about another big difference, which is for this user ID tracking. So what this is, it's for individual customers. If you can log in to your website It's for individual customers that are browsing a business across different devices and platforms, as long as they're logged into their Google account. So you'll need to work with a web developer actually to create unique user IDs, but it shows a more accurate user journey. So for example, someone might browse your products on a Pixel tablet at breakfast. They might do some more research on a browser on their work computer at lunch. And then finally, they might make that final purchase, that final conversion on their iPhone after dinner. So that shows this, like I said, more accurate user journey through the user IDs, which you will need to embed code onto your website to actually to track this. But yeah, so that's all of my sort of interesting features and differences complete. Dan and Ursula, I don't know whether you had anything to add on any new features or questions about them.
Not for now. I think that gives us that really good overview, right? I mean, I think what's interesting, you talk about the machine learning, predictive audiences. I think we all, as marketers, have to be thinking that way so much more now. Yeah. You know, fundamentally, I think we've been reliant on quite accurate data for quite a few years, and I think it's kind of paved the way of how we work as digital marketers specifically. And I do think that reliance is going to be a sort of a sharp wake-up call, in the sense that it's already changing, but I do think that our access to data and accurate data will become limited in years to come, and that actually machine learning is going to be so important so that these platforms are able to utilize less information to give us more insight, so that we still get the insight we need to make better marketing decisions, but it's not been in the same way that it has previously. I just think that's the way it's going. Ursula, did you have anything to add?
No, I think what you're saying is really interesting, and yeah, it will be. It's exciting to think about what AI is going to be able to inform us with as digital marketers. Definitely, I think it's probably also just worth noting that what we've shown you here, definitely at Wagda, like one of the project that me, Emily, and a couple of others in the team are working on is obviously migrating all our clients across from Universal Analytics to GA4. A couple of things that we have noticed is, because obviously GA4 is still in its infancy, we've set up certain things. So I think we had an issue maybe about a month ago where we set up IP filters for like half of our clients, and then we went back a week later to do the other half, and GA4 had completely changed how you set that up, which was a bit of a shock. But yeah, just be aware of stuff like that it can move, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a couple more changes and things like that in the next couple of months.
Folks, feel free to pop any last minute questions in the chat just as we wrap up. Thank you so much for that, Emily. That was super useful. And just to kind of draw your attention, really, I mentioned it at the start. As an agency, we do a huge amount at the moment of migrations. It's become really popular, especially over the last 4 to 6 weeks, for us to basically get you set up on GA4, so that you've got everything that you need kind of moving forward. All the details will be in this follow-up that we'll send across. That's actually, if you go on our website, we've got a lovely countdown that just really lets you know how long you've got left to make the full switch, just to really add the pressure to where we need to be by kind of definitely by this time next year. But yeah, if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to let us know. And I think just on the final slide, we've got another webinar coming up. This one's a lovely free one, actually. How to develop a social media advertising strategy that generates a return on investment. This one's proving to be really popular. We've sold 50 tickets so far. It's a free session, so all you need to do is snap up your ticket to get on. But there is a capacity, I believe, that we've set because of the volume. So do take a look at that. All the details will be in the follow-up, but this one's going to be a great hour. I'm going to give you some insight that's very 2022 going into 2023 in terms of how to approach your social media, where it should actually fit in the funnel from a paid social media perspective, and how you can actually see tangible success and results, because it is a particularly challenging arena to kind of advertise in. Paul's really great session. Well done all. Does not happen by accident. Thanks for all the prep and work. Oh no, thanks, Paul. I'll be honest, the team worked really hard to in terms of how we communicate with clients and how we deliver added value, not only to our customers and our clients, but also to the wider business marketplace. So thank you ever so much, because I know that Emily and Ursula have put a lot of work into the work that they're doing at the moment on GA4. Lovely feedback across the board, folks. Thanks, Michael. So glad you find it beneficial. Rowan, Catherine, it's all coming through. Bella, Jamie Garner, thank you. Really insightful and helpful. Brilliant as always from Kylie Lardy. And more, the positive feedback is coming through. So thanks ever so much. Thanks again to Emily and Ursula. If you've enjoyed this session, don't hesitate to leave us a Google review. It goes a long, long way. Wagada Digital, we've got 2 Google My Business listings, west of England, where myself and Emily are based, and St Albans, where Ursula is based. And yeah, it always goes a long way as businesses, as you know. So thank you ever so much. Have a fantastic rest of the day. Really glad you found it beneficial, and good luck in your GA4 journey. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.